This is Ryan Abraham, Shotgun Spratling, USCFootball.com. Instant analysis on the field here at Rice-Eccles Stadium, where the Trojans fall, dramatic fashion, 43-42 to the Utah Utes. Crazy game out here, always nuts. USC gets a big lead early on, aren't able to hold on. Defense kind of just went away for a while, but it was a nutty one out there to come down to a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. Less than a minute left, USC trying to score. Doesn't happen. Place goes crazy. People are jumping on the field. It was absolutely nuts down here on the field.
A little bit of deja vu, actually. 2017, USC played Utah at home. Utah scores with 42 seconds left, I believe it was. Yeah. Go for two. USC gets to stop and gets the win. 48 seconds left tonight. They score, go for two. Nick Figueroa gets his hands on Cam Rising. He scrambles up the middle, jumps through kind of a tackle attempt, and scores the game-winning points. So 43-42. I think it was earlier in the week or last week, Chris Trevino kind of said that USC's kind of won in every fashion. And I pointed out they haven't really won that gunslinger yet. Yeah. So this was their opportunity to, and they came up just shy. So much offense from both sides. And the offenses were, assisted so well by the referees in this game. No one could get off the field in the second half, really, and that was the biggest difference. Even when USC created a turnover, they weren't able to capitalize on that. And, Utah, the crowd, they got the momentum going in the second half, and, they were able to ride with it. And USC did better with the crowd, but you could still see that the crowd had its effect on USC tonight. There were some false starts, some different things, a ton of penalties just all over the field. And it really affected USC, the penalties and some big-time injuries as well for USC. And, a valiant effort. If you were coming into the season looking and you go, USC's 6-1 and they lose to Utah, you'd be like, that would be a successful first half of the season going into that bye week, and weren't favored this week. They were expected to lose. They lose by 1 point in this one. So a disappointing loss for USC because they had chances. Yeah. And Lincoln Riley said the officiating was terrible, but said they still should have won the game. They had their opportunities. They were an inch away multiple times is what he said. And they were an inch away from pulling away in this game multiple times, and they couldn't do that. Utah was able to hang around a little bit in the first half while USC's offense was rolling, and then they got the momentum going. The crowd got loud, and they were able to find a way to get the win here.
For sure, yeah. He said they were this close all the time, but he wasn't going to blame it. It's not excuses for this team, he said. A lot of the players said the same thing. It's not about a call here or a call there. But he did mention the officiating was terrible, and it's hard to disagree with that. But the offense, let's start with the offense doing so well. I wanted to see how this team came out early on. If you remember the other tough environment they played in, we were up in Corvallis. They didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. That was a more defensive game. This one wasn't like that, but USC started off gangbusters again, 3 straight touchdown drives to start the game. And I asked, some of the guys about, handling the noise. It seemed like everyone thought that they did a good job. Travis Dye talked about it. Like we heard from Andrew Voorhees a little bit. I think they handled the noise a lot better. It looked like it was cleaner. You're going to have some false starts. They had a couple of those, but overall, they were scoring early. They had some big plays. Caleb Williams had like 55-yard run, some big chunk plays on those first couple of drives that helped, but they seemed like they were clicking on offense, which is something I wanted to see. A little surprising they lost when they were clicking on offense, but it was a lot better looking than what we saw in Corvallis.
Yeah, the offense was clicking, and you said one call doesn't change a game, but if they don't get that first third down roughing the passer that's called that ends up leading to a Utah touchdown, it could be 21-0. Yeah. And you've then taken the crowd completely out of it. You may have taken the opposing team out of it at 21-0. So, that one call, I think that's probably the biggest call in this game. I know there were some later calls. There's another roughing the passer, and Nick Figueroa, it was called on him, and I asked him, if he got any explanation from the referees, like, hey, you're not supposed to do this or this. No explanation from the referees, but he said, I can't leave it in the referee's hands. And, kind of after a couple of the early calls, that should have been the message to the team on the sidelines, like, we can't leave anything in, but it felt like every time USC had a true pass rush, there was some kind of flag coming out, whether it was a positive for them, whether there's a holding or something, or there's a roughing the passer call or pass interference, just a ton of calls. This should have been the most exciting game, one of the most exciting games so far in college football this season, but the fourth quarter was so just herky-jerky, like there's so many reviews, so many penalties being called that it made it difficult even being here on the sideline to be, to feel the emotion of the game constantly. Like you could feel that in Corvallis. They let them play in the fourth quarter of that game. So the officiating made this a difficult game late to really enjoy the way it should have been for fans. But, some of the calls went that way. The offense, there was a lull in the middle of the game a little bit as Utah made some adjustments, but then USC picked it back up, and you saw some different guys contributing. Early on it was Caleb Williams, Travis Dye scoring a touchdown, Jordan Addison getting in the end zone, but then it was Kyron Ware-Hudson getting his second touchdown this season, and then you get 2 Josh Vallow touchdowns.
Yeah.
His last catch was in 2019, the last time he really played much, and he's been basically used only as a blocker this season. They put him out in pass routes. Like when he's playing 30-something snaps last game, he goes into pass route like 6 times. So like when he comes on the field, he's basically blocking the entire time. So they used that to their advantage, went away from their tendencies, and found him wide open using Jordan Addison as a decoy once, and then just throwing it out and getting a couple blocks from Mario Williams and Jordan Addison to get 2 touchdowns. And I want to say the last catch he had was against Cal, which was a touchdown as well. I'll have to go back and check that to make it official. But the last time he played significant reps was back in that Cal game in 2019. So the last 3 games you've seen him come along. So we're really fun to see because of all the trials and tribulations he's gone through. And listening to Andrew Voorhees talk about, it's just incredible to see him work through it all and still find a way. So that's really fun to see. But you also get Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Could have been the game-winning touchdown with 4 or 5 minutes to go.
I think it was like a 3rd and 8, and he catches catch and run 20 yards in for the score. You're like, Michael Jackson? Like, we haven't heard his name all that, his first catch of the season.
He hadn't even come on the field until a couple plays before that, and part of that is, unfortunately for USC, had some big-time injuries in this game, including Blitnikoff winner Jordan Addison goes out of the game, and he came back on the field in street clothes and crutches. But the way people talked about it, and the way, just some of the words and the tone that was used did not sound good as far as the potential of this injury being, a long-term injury. And then also on the defensive side, you lose Eric Gentry. And to see him hopping on one foot in a boot, they took him off on a cart off from the sideline, put him in a boot. He comes back out, and he's hopping on one foot to go into the defensive huddles there in the fourth quarter. Just shows you the buy-in of this team and why, they take this loss, but the message in the post-game press conference was that they still have everything in front of them outside of an undefeated season. Yeah. And a lot of people, it seemed like, were positive that this team will bounce back from this in the right way. So we'll see if that is the case for this team going forward.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley was asked about those 2 key injuries to Jordan Addison and Eric Gentry, and he said didn't have an update or anything at this point. They do go into the bye week, so we'll be evaluating. I know Eric Gentry came right out of this tunnel where we're standing right now, was waving to the USC fans who were just right over here, and just a lot of energy on the sideline from those guys. But 2 key players. I think on the offensive side, we heard from Travis Dye, they have so many weapons that Addison goes down. There's a lot of other guys that stepped up. On the defensive side, it might be a little tougher because he was the key linebacker there, someone that you didn't expect to be a big contributor, and he was. And some of the other guys came in, with Shane Lee or Raylan Gopher. Some of those guys struggled a little bit. So we'll see how that affects it. But when you look at this defense, Shotgun, to give up over 200 yards to a tight end, your top tight end for Utah is out, Brett Keefe, and Dalton Kincaid looks like Travis Kelce out there. Over 500 yards of offense for Utah. They got to find some answers because this was a really good second-half defensive team, and they were not in this one.
Yeah, Utah attacked where USC was weak, and USC has struggled a little bit over the middle with some different things this season at times. But coming into this game, Shane Lee injured. Now he played, but in the fourth quarter, he wasn't on the field for those last couple drives. So you wonder if there was, if they said we just got to put somebody else out there because he had his full left hand from his fingers down in a cast. His thumb was in a cast. So tackling, what Lincoln Riley said, tackling for the defense as a whole was probably their worst effort. And Shane Lee, that makes it that much more difficult to tackle when you can't grab anybody because you only have your fingertips. So did not have him on the field. Now Tuasivi Numora comes up with a huge stop on the 3rd down. And unfortunately, if we go for it on 4th down, they get in there. So USC had chances to get off the field and couldn't get that one last stop. And a couple times when they felt like they got that last stop, there was a flag on the play. Yeah. But 2 linebackers, your 2 starting linebackers not in there, and Utah crushed USC over the middle there. I was surprised they weren't able to run the ball a little bit more. USC did a decent job there, but they had no answer for Dalton Kincaid. They tried a couple different things, Lincoln Riley said, but just no answer, and he credited them for making some throws and catches, but said the tackling wasn't great to give him some extra yards after catch, but 16 catches. It's not like he had 4 or 5 catches and he just had, these big 20-yard runs. Like, I think the longest.
Little technical difficulties here on instant analysis. We ran out of battery, so we got to start again. You were talking about Dalton Kincaid. Give me a chance to look at the stats. He was targeted 15 times, 15 catches, 217 yards. Crazy night for him. 90-plus yards after the catch. You can't let a tight end do it. Every time they threw to Dalton Kincaid, he made a play. You can't let that happen.
I mean, I thought it was even more than that. The stats I saw immediately after were 16 for 243, so we'll have to see what the official stats say on that. But he was dominating for Utah. And again, he attacked the area where USC had one injury already in Shane Lee, and then to lose Eric Gentry and that length in the middle. And USC, I thought there were some different things they could do. And once I rewatched the game a couple times, we'll see if they tried some different things. But with Gentry's length, you got to try to man up with him and use him against a guy like that to try to slow him down. But they had no answer for him, and it was so easy pitch and catch for Cameron Rising that USC never really got the pass rush there to affect Rising, except when they tried to take some of the deeper.
Whoa. Good catch by shotgun grab. It is blowing out here.
Yeah, suddenly the winds has kicked up here. Hopefully we do not lose the camera here.
I'm going to put my foot on. Okay, we're probably going to have to wrap up this instant analysis because
everything's going wild right now.
People are not wanting us to finish this here.
Yeah, this is kind of how the night went for USC. Things started off okay, started off good for USC. By the end of the night, people were rushing the field, and USC, suffers their first loss. But how do they bounce back for it? That would be the big question going forward. Things didn't go their way in a lot of ways. And Lincoln Riley, I was just looking through my photos when we had our little break, and Lincoln Riley said they were an inch away a lot of times. Yeah, coaches say that. Looking through the photos on that final 2-point conversion, Nick Figueroa gets his hand on Cameron Rising. Kalen Bullock is diving at his legs. Jalen Smith is diving at his hips, right with about the 2-yard line. Neither one of those guys can get him down. He gets into the end zone to score the game-winning point. So that ended up being the way it was. A lot of emotion after the game. We'll see how USC bounces back from it. I thought it was interesting. Travis Dye said, I've been on some teams where wins are either a positive or negative, and it depends on the leadership of the guys on the team as to whether that's what that case is. And he said, from seeing the leaders in the locker room after that game, that he expects this team to get better because of this loss, and listening to Andrew Voorhees talk about seeing guys be emotional, seeing guys cry, and saying it was a good thing to see that because it shows how much everybody cares and how much people are bought in. And obviously that was a big question for USC coming into the season with so many transfers, so many new guys. So we saw some guys step up. So that's the positives on this. The offense was clicking for much of the night, but the defense has a lot of things to clean up. They got to get more consistent on the pass rush, and that means taking away that easy throw over the middle to the tight end so that the pass rush then has more time to get there.
All right, well, I think we better get out of here before our equipment or us blow away. USC 6-1 going into the bye week. I think you'd take it if you were a USC fan at the beginning of the season, but obviously the way things were going, had a real shot to be top 5 kind of team in the country, but they still have all their goals in front of them, so we'll kind of talk about all that.
A lot of goals, but makes that UCLA game potentially even more of an emphasis, because if UCLA wins next week against Oregon, that'll be a big matchup in the Pac-12. But there's the potential of a 3-way tie now. If USC could beat UCLA, and then with Utah, UCLA haven't beaten Utah already, so it could put even more onus on the crosstown showdown later this season.
All right, well, that's going to wrap things up here from Rice-Eccles Stadium. They don't want us here anymore, so we'll probably get out of here, head back to Los Angeles. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Ryan Abraham. Make sure you check out USCfootball.com for more.